first, and then look at the phase 2 of people who want more advanced support and start to say tax harvesting strategies and how can I maximize and optimize. But until then, let's get the basics right. Julian, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I would just say I think increasingly we're also starting to see employers say, let's not just try and provide this support to the employees, but let's actually think about the whole family unit. Let's think about spouses and partners. Let's think about children. I went to school in England and we got taught about the list of kings and queens of England from 1066 in chronological order, something that has been of absolutely no use to me apart from in crossword puzzles, right? But nobody ever taught me as a child how to look at a budget, the value of money, compound interest, and the importance of savings. Nobody talked to me about that. So I think there's an enormous opportunity. And as we know with a lot of things, learning languages, learning musical instruments, the earlier that you can teach people this stuff, the more ingrained it's going to be, and the more it's just going to be a natural course of action for people to be very conscious of not spending more they can afford, being conscious of taking on debt that they can't afford to repay back. It just becomes a natural part of you.
Another topic, can we start building this into our school systems at a young age, teaching children how to manage these types of things? Agree with you 100%. That is definitely, if I talk to any of my friends that work for large companies, they're not even aware of the benefits that they have, that the company offers at all. They wouldn't even know where to go if they had a problem or looking for some financial support. So they tend to take time off work and go find those resources themselves. They talk amongst their friend groups or whatever. So I think when a company puts in a program like this, or any program per se, with these phenomenal benefits, I guess how would you recommend that companies implement this and create awareness to this and really educate and train employees on this resource that's available? Ian, let me start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and there's several ways to do it, Christy. I think a couple of key things. One, go back to that total well-being framework. So let people see that this fits in and is connected. And it's part of what Julian said earlier on, is we actually care about you. So that's very important up front. Then on the logistics, I think what you want to do is a multi-factor communication campaign. Of course, you can send out the blast emails and things like that. We found having webinars where we start to go into the content and explain to people what are the different aspects of financial wellness, get them over that concern, and whatever history they bring to it helps. But then also getting people to go and do something. So having them do an assessment where they can see where they're strong or where they're weak also helps. And then the last thing is, and I think this picks up on Julian's recent point, is multiple times going back to people. So we want to link them through with, say, the employee assistance program, with any other programs that they have, so that they know they can come there. But also approaching them where things happen. So, for example, when a life event happens, right now I may not care about something, but if something happens to me, good or bad, that could be getting married, having a child, it could be bad situations like getting divorced, somebody's ill, then you need somebody to guide you through financially without all the emotional baggage that comes with those. That's being dealt with separately. So I do think there's a big challenge for employers to launch it properly, but then keep the momentum going when they are already in play, instead of just saying it's a one-off, people will learn how to fish and then they're done. No, it needs some more work.
Wonderful. I want to acknowledge we have some amazing questions coming in, so I'm just going to get through a couple more things, and then we're going to save some time at the end of this webinar to answer those questions. So again, we're going to take one more poll, the last poll of this webinar. The question is, which areas of financial well-being have caused the most concern to your company and or your employees year to date? If you don't mind answering that, we'll get right back to it.
All right, drum roll,
amazing. Please. So Julian, what do you think of these results?
Yeah, this is, I would say, typically what we see is there's a significant focus on that longer term retirement planning. And I think that's partly because it's a lot of what companies often think about when they think about financial wellness. Oh, it's all about retirement planning. It's great to have that long term focus, don't get me wrong, But then, yes, we do see, especially with the state of the economy and cost of living as it is, that there's been a lot more pressure over the last couple of years on the areas of budgeting, short-term debt, emergency savings, that kind of thing.
So Julian, based on what we're seeing here, what strategies and tools do you recommend for organizations to support their employees in financial well-being? Where's a good place to start?
Yes, I think some of this, good question, Christy. I think some of this comes back to a number of areas that we've touched on today. And I'd say, back to something we said at the beginning, the most important thing that I believe an organization do is to show employees that you care and to meet them where they're at through things like life events and those other types of things that can really help to meet employees in their moments of need. As Ian mentioned, this could include delivering live or virtual webinars on financial wellness and really providing those more holistic, comprehensive educational resources. And another important dimension that we're seeing is access to live individual coaching, such as the support that WPO provides. I think digital education can get people so far, but then somebody really wants to be able to pick up the phone and be able to talk to a real human being in their country, in their language, to really help them with their unique personal situation. Other thoughts on this? I'd say, a company providing financial well-being support, it doesn't need to be overly complex to implement. It doesn't need to break the bank from a budgeting perspective. And as we showed with some of the sentiment data earlier, it's also something that is beneficial for companies to do beyond just that paternalistic element. It does lead to happier, more engaged employees who are more likely to be net promoters of your organization as well. So I'd say the most important thing is start with some action and then really review the results from there. It's easier to then add pieces onto that incrementally from a solid foundation and base than to try and design this crazy, complex, all singing, all dancing solution that tries to be absolutely everything to everybody.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. I'd say, we spoke about multiple ways of people getting access to it and finding out where they can get the resources. This piece that we had early on about the ROI is, can you actually get some numbers in and look where the baseline is and how things are changing over time? And back to that, hey, if we find that this group is struggling with this issue, do we already have a program that we need to better communicate? Or is there a gap and we as a company need to now help people out? So for example, Julian, you mentioned maybe having a retirement provider come on site. If we see retirement savings as a concern, let's get the retirement provider in there. But what happens if we have an issue on protection? Do we need to come in and maybe advance the company benefits that are given for life and disability, let people see that, and maybe introduce a flexible approach in that country and say, well, we give you a baseline, but if you want, you can buy up. So you need to have that data to hand to see where the gaps are, then constantly address those gaps and help people out. And a globally consistent assessment and approach to this will really help with that.
That's an excellent point. Really mitigate the pain points with what the data shows and really use a targeted approach to help the population in a way that makes the most sense based on what they're asking for.
Yeah, instead of hoping that, well, not hoping, but hearing a bit of noise in the system. I think you use the word anecdotal, Julian.
Right.
You hear somebody in some country complains, or somebody said something to the country president and they send a note to HR and say fix. And one person does not make the whole population. You need to have actual data in there, respecting, of course, individual privacy.
Trainings or orientation to what the company is offering can be so incredibly powerful in getting people on board with what the company's offering. I think if that's missed or we don't kind of kick it off in that way, it becomes difficult to get engagement or participation. So I know there's lots of great ways to do that. We can talk about further.
Julia?
So I was just getting, Christy, with maybe you touched upon something there. It's one of the questions that we get asked when we're talking to our clients in this space is, well, what's the utilization and engagement like with the tool? We give the consulting answer, it depends, but it really does. When I think about some of the more successful clients that we have in this space, they're able to achieve utilization beyond what they typically see or what we typically see with global programs. And I think a lot of that comes down to kind of being able to clearly communicate these programs and critically the what's in it for me, for the employee. And we do see that pattern really repeated across our book of business. I think the clients who do stay in front of their employees on a more regular basis with communications and engagement campaigns, those are the ones that do tend to see those more elevated levels of engagement, utilization, and ultimately the success of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And at the risk of jumping on too much, I'll add one more thing, Christy, is give people a sense of agency.
Mm-hmm.
The last few years, people have felt the world's happening to them. And with some of this piece, to borrow Julian's analogy of teaching them how to fish, is here's a fishing rod, go out and do something. And so it doesn't have to be a big thing, but to actually feel that they can take control over it, even if it's small things, is a huge one. Instead of this feeling like the world's coming at me and it's just attacking me and I can't do anything. So that bit of training, the counseling, the coaching, and you can call and get some support, I think is vital for people emotionally and not only financially.
Excellent advice. It's about the small steps that get you to the greater goal. Don't look at it all at one time. It's very overwhelming. Absolutely. It's hard being an adult. We have a lot of things we have to take care of. It's quite intense. I would like to go ahead and turn to the audience for the questions that they asked.
Yeah.
One of the questions was, can you give examples of the things that can be measured to score employee financial well-being? Julian or Ian, one of you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll start. Julian's my master of measurement, but I'm sure he can pick up and help me out. So when you look at what financial wellness is, we talked about it not just being savings. So we look at those 4 areas, and you would have seen in the questions there. So yes, there's savings, short-term and long-term, but there's also the other areas of budgeting, debt, and protection. So if you have an assessment that addresses all 4 of those areas, with some detail on each of them, you're then able to go into a bit more detail than just saying everybody save more for retirement. So we would say a solid questionnaire that's consistent across the countries with some demographic cuts of the data will allow you to dive in and look at all of that holistically. Julian, I know I was very high level there. Anything you want to add on that?
No, I'd say just the one piece I would highlight that's really important there, Ian, is the global consistency. I think what we mentioned earlier is that historically, companies have been relying on their retirement provider in Mexico, their life insurance provider in the UK, and that's great support. But what it means is that you have a slightly apples to oranges situation. So how do you make sense of this data that you're getting from your retirement provider in one country and versus a retirement provider in the other country? Well, having a global program that enables you to, on an apples to apples way, compare how employees across different countries, but also across different demographics are doing, I think that's the key, because to Ian's point, that then allows you to focus your limited budget, resources, time, money into where it's going to have the most value and impact, where to meet where those critical needs are.
Excellent, wonderful. One other question that came up was, do we see certain demographics that have lower financial wellness? And can you speak to approaches on having a more targeted, actionable, meaningful level of engagement and support for employees that have their own unique challenges and needs?
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that one first, and maybe if you want to kind of add any comments. So there are some correlations and patterns that we do see repeated across book of business. So if I were to take a poll of people saying, how do you think financial wellness scores vary by income ranges, I think probably 95% of you would probably say, oh, well, we think it probably increases as a function of income. And we do see that being borne out in the data that we see. So the financial wellness scores do increase with quartiles of income. There are some other correlations that we see repeated across book of business as well. So the fact that financial wellness scores increase as a function of age, and they decrease as the household size and the number of financial dependents that you're caring for increases. Ian talked about some of the other regional ones, and the fact that we see that men have slightly higher financial wellness scores than women across different geographies and industries. So there are definitely some trends that we see. And then the question was strategies that companies have done to either manage those or be able to provide that more individualized level support. So a couple of things is Sorry, I realise I may be frozen here. Apologies if I just froze for a moment there.
You're back on. Everybody kind of froze.
I don't know where I lost you, but so I'll talk to how companies can deliver campaigns to employees to help them address some of these gaps. So as an example, we saw some clients where their younger employees were struggling with savings and retirement savings in a particular market. And I think what they realized in conjunction with us is that going to younger employees with a message of you need to have X amount saved by the time you get to retirement can be a very daunting and overwhelming message that can prevent people from even wanting to look at it. They just, it's like going to the dentist. They just say, I don't want to touch that, and they run away and hide.
Yeah.
So we changed the messaging on that to say, here is what the power of small changes that you can make now. So make a small incremental increase to your contributions now, and by the time it accumulates to retirement age, it could be this much larger amount more at retirement age. So sometimes it's just changing the spin on the messaging to incentivize that positive emotion and those positive mindset and actions.
And sorry, Julian, you weren't finished there. I apologize.
So the last point I was going to say is, I think the other part of the question was how to get people kind of their individual support. And that's where I'd say the individual coaching comes in enormously helpful, is with all of the digital education and engagement campaigns, there's really no substitute for somebody being able to speak to somebody that's a professional, that's knowledgeable, to help them with their own personal situation and challenges. Sorry, Ian, over to you.
No problem. I was going to take a slightly different tack, so I'll do a big and onto what you had, which is make it easy for people. So what we've noticed is people can take the advice and say, I need to do something. But if you don't make it easy for them to action, the fall off rate is high. So for example, if somebody says, I need to put an emergency savings plan in place, if you don't have something lined up where they could go and sign up for that pretty easily, if you're doing it live on a webinar or in person, people forget about it, they don't want to do it. And as you say, sometimes they feel it's like going to the dentist. I know I'm going to clean my teeth, but I just don't want to do it. So as a company, if you know there's an issue, then not only educate people, but after that, have an immediate access to resources for people. And that could just be as simple as we've negotiated a good terms and conditions with a savings institution. Don't even need the payroll deduction. But if you contact this bank and you name our company, you'll get better savings rates. You can automate it and you can get that done. Could be as simple as that. If it's protection, then can we make sure that we're looking at our employer programs for people and letting them know what we have and any flexibility to buy app. So I do think there's plenty of options a company can do with their homework, knowing when they're teaching things that people can then take some action on that.
I know employee resource groups is a big development within most companies today, really trying to use employee resource groups to interconnect employees within the company from a diversity perspective, an inclusive perspective. Do you see this being an option to have the different resource groups, whether it's a women's group or a certain group within the employees organization, that they could build this in and offer different kind of aspects of financial well-being if we look at different demographics within the organization? Or is that too much of a leap?
It's definitely not too much of a leap. I would say it's a great start. What we found is that while the advice doesn't change for somebody, no matter what their demographic is, this is how you save, this is what you do. Certain groups do show that they've got certain issues that are more prevalent. So if you have somebody, and it's back to Julian's point about caring, if you have a resource group that's shown to care for whatever demographic that they're dealing with, they're your front end in saying, we see within this group there's these issues. We've now got somebody who can help you with those specific issues. I think that's a great start, and it doesn't have to be too complicated, and it certainly wouldn't be seen as too intrusive. And we've done many of these. Julian, anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I'd say what I've seen over the past maybe year or two is companies trying to tie in with broader themes or global events, like UN or OECD kind of events that are going on. So I know there's been a lot of activity of companies recently who are planning events for International Women's Day coming up and doing kind of like webinars and ERG presentations to that. So we're seeing that as natural ways for companies to kind of factor in financial related topics as part of broader planning and delivery for those events. We have a kind of a global 2024 financial well-being calendar that targets a number of those different kind of global days and events, and happy to share that with anybody on today's call who might be interested in that after the session.
Wonderful. I hope everybody can hear me. There was a little bit of sound issues there. But yes, the power of peer-to-peer support, even within organizations, can really help. If somebody had a great experience or they got help in a good direction, if people know about it and they've been educated on it, they can help direct other employees, and managers can play a role in that too, as well. So with that being said, this has been amazing. Julian and Ian, I know we could talk all day long. Is there any last minute thoughts you want to share or you think the audience should know today before we close out?
Sure, I'd say don't get intimidated by it. It's a necessary part. It's a good part about being an employer, helping people with their needs. You don't need to go too big too soon, but there are some pretty good solutions that you can put out there globally that can get you started on the journey and let you make sure that that total well-being approach is completely done. It doesn't have any big gaps in there. So give it a try, come and inquire if you want to have a look at any of our solutions on that, but just don't be scared. Just like some of the people we said may not want to take the advice. As an employer, don't think this is too big and too scary to tackle. Julian?
No, I think you summarised it nicely, Ian. There's some really quick wins that companies can have here, and yeah, don't be scared by dipping your toe in the water for the first time on this.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, the both of you. This has been so insightful and you bring a tremendous amount of information to the table. I do want to take this moment just to reference that Workplace Options does have an enhanced financial service program in partnership with Fidelity, where we can connect members to qualified financial professionals that can provide a wide range of topics in over 75 different countries, whether it relates to debt management, budgeting, financial needs, long-term goal setting, and much more. So if you need any more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. I also want to thank our audience for attending. You're going to receive a survey at the end of this webinar where you'll have the opportunity to add your comments, any feedback you can share about what you heard today or future topics that you'd like to see covered in future events would be wonderful to have. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.